Welcome back to Book 3 of the Royal Rangers series, Duel at Araluen. Today I have Chapter 15, and we're going to go ahead and get into it. Once it was fully dark, Horace and Gillen crouched on the southern walkway with only their heads showing above the parapet. There was a lot of ambient light in the hill fort behind them, with several cook fires preparing food, and at least a dozen torches and braziers providing light and warmth for the garrison, and they had no wish to be seen silhouetted against it by those below. It was just after the 8th hour when Gillen touched Horace's arm and pointed to his right. "There," he said softly. "See them?" Horace followed the direction in which Gillen was pointing, squinting to see more clearly. "Look a little to the left or right," Gillen advised him. "Your peripheral vision is better in the dark." Once Horace did this, he could make out what Gillen had seen. Half a dozen men were moving surreptitiously out of the camp, heading for the distant tree line. He was watching them when he felt Gillen's hand on his arm once more. This time, the ranger was pointing to the eastern side of the enemy camp. Sure enough, another small group was moving out, crouching as they went. If he and Gillen hadn't been expecting it, Horace thought, they probably wouldn't have noticed. The campfires in the Fox's camp had been built up unusually high tonight, and the glare they created tended to dazzle a watcher's vision and mask any movement. "They're trying to be inconspicuous," Gillen said. He was whispering, in spite of the fact that the would-be attackers were well out of earshot. "My guess is they'll circle round in a wide loop and regroup at the base of the north side. There go another lot." He indicated the west side once more. He stepped back from the parapet and rose from the crouch he had been maintaining, rubbing the small of his back to ease the slight stiffness there. "They'll have to make their way across to the trees, where they'll be under cover," he said. "I figure it'll take them at least an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, to work their way around to the northern side of the fort. Let's go check things on the north wall." They climbed down the stairs and made their way across the compound to the north side. The entire contingent of archers was there, along with 10 of the troopers, waiting for orders. The remaining cavalrymen were keeping watch on the south wall. Horace stepped forward. "Right, men. 8 of you take the western walkway. Gillen will join you there. The rest of you can join me on the eastern side. The signal to start shooting will be when we ignite the 3 beacons here on the north side. Understood?" There was a low mumble of understanding from the archers. The split was uneven, with 8 on the west wall and 12 on the east, because Gillen would be joining the western group, and his skill as an archer was equivalent to 2 or 3 of the others. Horace addressed the 10 troopers who were assembled. "It'll be your job to deal with any of the enemy who manage to make it down from the walkway and avoid the sharpened spikes there. They may try to rope down," he told them. "Use your lances for preference. Don't let them get into close quarters." The cavalry lances were designed primarily for use on horseback, but their long reach would make them ideal for this sort of defensive action. "May as well get to your posts now," Horace continued. "We don't expect the attack to start for several hours. Gillen's guess is that they'll wait for the moon to set, so you can sleep at your posts as long as you leave one man awake and on watch, and keep your weapons handy. All right, get moving." There was a stir of movement as the 3 forces moved to take up their positions, the archers climbing to the walkways on the eastern and western sides of the fort, where they would have a clear shot at the northern walkway as the raiders came over the parapet. They settled down, leaving one of their number to keep watch. The others lay on the walkway or sat with their backs to the palisade. They were professionals, and long experience in the army had taught them to take any opportunity to sleep that arose. Within a few minutes, most of them had dozed off. On the ground level, the 10 troopers settled down as well. Horace and Gillen walked to the north wall. They had left a ladder in place, and the two friends climbed it now, moving to the parapet to study the hill below them. As yet, there was no sign of the raiders forming up. Horace grunted impatiently. "They'll still be working their way around the east and west sides," Gillen told him. "All the same, I wish I knew where they are and what they're doing," Horace replied. "I'd like to know when they're ready to start up the hill." "I was thinking the same thing," Gillen said, and, for the first time, Horace noticed that he had a coil of rope looped over his shoulder. "So I might slip down there and keep an eye on things." As he spoke, he moved to the right, to the midpoint between two of the torches burning in the braziers. They were small torches, and the light they cast was uneven, leaving a patch of shadow at the middle where the light didn't quite reach. Gillen looped the rope over 3 of the pointed logs that formed the palisade and eased his upper body over the wall. "You're going down there?" Horace asked. Gillen grinned at him. "That's the general idea. We want information, and this is the best way to get it." "But what if you're seen?" Horace asked. Gillen's grin turned to a long-suffering look. "Oh, please." He rolled over the top of the wall, holding the rope tight and avoiding letting his silhouette show. Then he lowered himself quickly down into the darkness. "I'll whistle when I'm back," he called softly. "Stay there and wait for me." And he began to ghost his way down the hill, moving swiftly through the long grass. Horace was able to follow his progress for a minute or two. Then he was distracted briefly by the cry of a night bird. When he returned his gaze to the spot where he had last seen Gillen, there was no sign of him. It took Gillen 15 minutes to reach the base of the hill. He was guided by the campfires of the observers who were posted there. He angled away from them so he would be approaching out of the darkness. Mindful that the raiders would also be approaching from below, he stayed several meters uphill. The last thing he wanted was for one of the foxes to stumble over him. When he saw one of the sentries pacing nervously by the campfire, 5 meters away, he dropped into cover and lay still, watching and listening. He lay there for half an hour before he heard movement. Looking up, all the while making sure to keep his face in the shadow of his cowl, he saw a group of 6 men making their way toward the campfires from the eastern side. A few minutes later, another small group came into sight, this time slipping in from the other side. He heard a voice, pitched low, but obviously annoyed, from one of the men in the first group. "Where have you been? You took your time." "We had farther to come than you," came the reply. "The trees were a good 50 meters farther away, and the tree line fell away to the west." The first man replied with a surly grunt. Obviously, he wasn't mollified by the explanation. "We don't have all night," he said. "The moon will set in an hour, and I want to start up the hill once the light has gone down." As he spoke, a second group arrived from the western side, then another from the east. That made about 25 men assembled here, thought Gillen. According to Matty's notes, there would be 40 in the attacking party, so there would be more to come. He saw that he was a good 10 meters up the hill from the point where the raiders were assembling. Slipping down to his belly, he crept closer until he was barely 5 meters away. As he moved, he heard 2 more groups arrive to be greeted in lowered voices by those already in position. Allowing that there might be more than 6 in each party, that probably meant they were all now assembled. A moment later, the first voice spoke again, confirming the fact. "All right, we're all here. The moon will set in about 40 minutes, and that'll be our signal to move. Where are the rope carriers?" 6 men held their hands up and stepped forward. Gillen could see that each one had a large coil of rope around his shoulders. "Good," continued the leader. "Space yourselves out, ready to go up the hill. Move slowly. We don't want anyone spotting us too early. Luckily, they've got those torches on the wall up there, and they should dazzle their night vision a little. The assembled men turned to look up at the fort. Gillen froze as they did, realizing he was now in their field of vision. The temptation to drop his head into cover was almost irresistible. But Gillen had been doing this sort of work for many years now, and he resisted it, staying still as a rock. As their leader spoke again, the heads turned back from the fort toward him, and the moment was over. Once you get to the top, drive those stakes into the ground and anchor the ropes. The rest of us will use them to get to the top without slipping or falling. Stay as low as you can while you're climbing, and don't make a sound. Check that your weapons aren't loose or likely to rattle. There was a small flurry of movement among the assembled group as they checked that swords were secure in their scabbards and axes were slung tight across shoulders. There was a low chorus indicating that all was well. Take a look at those sentries patrolling the walls. Again, all faces turned upward, and again, Gillen froze in position. Time your movement for when they've just passed that center torch and turned back. Their eyes will be dazzled for a few minutes, and their night vision will be pretty much ruined. When they reach the torch at either end, stop moving. He looked around the assembled men. We've got 4 ladders? Again, men raised their hands. Last man up in the 4 middle groups, make sure the rope is tied to a ladder. Then we can haul them up when we're ready. They should slip easily through this long grass. The ends are bowed upward to help them move freely. Gillen squinted to see the shape of the long ladders that rested on the ground near the men who had raised their hands. He was glad Matty had warned them. Things might have been a bit sticky otherwise. The attackers had clearly thought through their plans carefully, and they might well have broken the Araluen's defenses if they hadn't been forewarned. The leader continued, Once we've made it to the wall, get over as fast as you can. There should be a stairway at either end. Head for that and get down into the fort itself. Kill anyone you see. If we panic them, this might end up being more than a nuisance raid. With a bit of luck, we might rout them completely and put an end to this nonsense. He paused to let this sink in. All right, get some rest if you can. We've only got an hour to wait. No moving around, no talking, and, above all, no lights. Just lie still. Get some sleep if you can. But if anyone snores, I'll kill him. There was a low mutter of laughter. I mean it, he said, and the ripple of laughter died away. Time for me to go, Gillen thought. Lowering his head, he squirmed silently around until he was facing uphill again, and began to silently snake his way up to the fort. And that is going to be the end of Chapter 15. Thank you all for listening, and I will see you next time in Chapter 16. God bless, and have a good one.